I'm 64 years old, and 4 years ago, I thought I had finally reached that peaceful phase of life where the hard parts were behind me. My husband Tom had passed after a brief but brutal fight with pancreatic cancer, and while the grief was still raw, I'd at least made sure our finances were solid. We'd saved diligently, lived below our means, and Tom had been meticulous about planning for my future. The house was paid off. I had my nursing pension, and there was $520,000 in savings and investments. I thought I was secure. Then my daughter-in-law Melissa offered to help. Melissa was a financial advisor at Henderson Wealth Management, one of those firms with marble floors and leather chairs that made you feel like your money was in good hands. She'd married my son James 8 years earlier, and while we'd never been particularly close, I respected her. She was smart, polished, always dressed in those crisp blazers that screamed competence. When she suggested reviewing my portfolio over Sunday dinner one evening, it seemed thoughtful, caring even. "Linda, I hate to bring up business at dinner," she'd said, passing the mashed potatoes, "but I've been thinking about your situation. You're managing all of Tom's accounts by yourself, and I know how overwhelming that can be. I lost my own father at 22, and watching my mom try to navigate the finances alone." She shook her head. "I just don't want you going through that." James had smiled at her, that proud husband smile. "Mel's really good at this, Mom. She's helped 3 of my coworkers restructure their retirement accounts." I'd hesitated. Tom had always handled our investments, and since his death, I'd mostly left everything in the money market account where it was safe. The interest was low, but at least I wasn't losing anything. Still, Melissa's concern seemed genuine, and I was tired of pretending I understood all those financial statements. "I don't know, honey," I'd said. "Tom always kept things simple. I'm not sure I want to mess with what's working." "That's exactly the problem, Linda." Melissa had leaned forward, her voice dropping to that confidential tone that made you feel like you were getting insider information. "A money market account in this economy is actually losing you money. Inflation's running at 3.2%, and you're earning maybe 0.8%. That's real purchasing power you're hemorrhaging every month." The numbers had made my head spin, which I suppose was the point. James had reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mom, just let her run some projections. No pressure. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with." So I'd agreed to a meeting. Just a meeting. 2 weeks later, I sat in Melissa's corner office overlooking downtown, surrounded by framed certifications and photos of her shaking hands with people in expensive suits. She'd pulled up charts on her computer, all those red and green lines that supposedly represented my future. "Here's what I'm thinking," she'd said, swiveling the monitor toward me. "We move $475,000 into a diversified bond portfolio, municipal bonds, very safe, tax-advantaged. You'll see returns of 5 to 6%, which at your age is conservative but smart. I'll keep $45,000 liquid for emergencies, and we'll do quarterly reviews to make sure everything's on track." "What about the other money?" I'd asked. "Tom left me with $520,000. Management fees and account setup costs," Melissa had explained smoothly. "Standard in the industry. You'll see it back in returns within the first 6 months." Something about it had felt off, but James had been sitting right there, nodding along, and when I'd glanced at him, he'd said, "Mom, Mel's literally betting her professional reputation on this. She wouldn't steer you wrong." I'd signed the papers that afternoon. Melissa had walked me through each signature, explained every form, and by the time I left, my hand was cramping and my head was full of terms like fiduciary responsibility and risk-adjusted returns. She'd hugged me in the parking lot, promising quarterly statements and regular check-ins. "You're family, Linda," she'd said. "I'm going to take care of you the way Tom would have wanted." For the first 3 months, everything seemed fine. I'd get statements in the mail showing the portfolio value, the interest accumulating, all those numbers that suggested my money was growing. Melissa would call every few weeks to chat, asking about my garden, my book club, whether I'd been to see my sister in Phoenix. The conversations always ended with a casual, "Oh, and everything looks great with your accounts, by the way, right on track." I should have paid closer attention. Tom would have. But I was 64, lonely, and grateful that someone was handling the complicated parts while I figured out how to live alone in a house that still smelled like my husband's coffee every morning. The first real warning sign came in late September. My property tax bill arrived, and when I went to transfer money from the emergency account Melissa had set up, the balance showed $8,200 instead of $45,000. I'd called her immediately, my heart starting that anxious flutter it did whenever something financial went wrong. She'd answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Linda, I was just thinking about you. How are the hydrangeas coming along?" "Melissa, honey, I'm looking at my emergency account statement, and the balance seems wrong. It should be $45,000, but it's showing just over $8,000. There'd been a pause, then a sound like papers shuffling. "Oh, right. I should have called you about that. We had an opportunity to rebalance some of the portfolio shift into higher yield bonds while rates were favorable. I moved some of the emergency fund temporarily to maximize returns. It'll be back in the account by next month, with interest. But I need to pay my property taxes," I'd said, hearing the tremor in my voice and hating it. "That's due in 2 weeks." "Not a problem at all. I can wire you the money from the main portfolio. Actually, you know what? This is exactly why I love working with family. Most advisors would charge you a withdrawal fee, but I'll waive that. Give me until tomorrow, and I'll have the funds in your checking account." The money had appeared the next day, exactly as promised. I'd paid the tax bill and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. Melissa was a professional. She knew what she was doing, and she'd waived the fee, which proved she had my best interests at heart. But then October came, and I didn't receive my quarterly statement. I'd called Melissa 3 times, leaving increasingly worried voicemails. She'd finally texted back 2 weeks later. "So sorry. Statement got held up in compliance. Everything's great though, you're up 4.2% for the quarter. We'll drop the paperwork by this weekend." She didn't drop it by that weekend. Or the next one. By November, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake replaying every conversation, remembering how Tom used to pore over our statements, how he'd once spent 3 hours on the phone with our old advisor because a $47 fee hadn't been properly disclosed. He'd been paranoid about money, I'd always thought, but maybe he'd just been careful. I called Henderson Wealth Management directly, asking to speak with Melissa's supervisor. The receptionist had put me through to a man named Douglas Chen, a senior partner with a kind voice that immediately made me want to cry. "Mrs. Harper, I want to help you," he'd said after I'd explained my concerns. "But I need you to understand that I can't discuss specific client accounts without authorization. What I can tell you is that if you're not receiving statements, that's a serious compliance issue. Do you have copies of the documents you signed with Melissa?" I did. I'd kept them in Tom's old file cabinet, in a folder labeled Investments Melissa. That night, I spread them across the dining room table and started reading. Really reading, the way Tom would have. That's when I found it. Buried in the 6th page of the investment agreement, in that tiny font they use for terms and conditions, was a clause about co-investment opportunities and personal portfolio access. The language was deliberately vague, but it seemed to say that Melissa could invest my funds in opportunities that included her own financial interests. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough to know Tom never would have signed something like that. The next morning, I drove to Henderson Wealth Management unannounced. The receptionist tried to stop me, saying Melissa was with a client, but I walked past her down the hallway, following the nameplate signs until I found Melissa's office. She wasn't with a client. She was on her phone, laughing, feet up on her desk. When she saw me in the doorway, the laughter stopped abruptly. "Linda, I wasn't expecting you. Where is my money, Melissa?" She'd swung her feet down, composing her face into professional concern. "Your money is exactly where it's supposed to be, in a diversified municipal bond portfolio. Linda, are you feeling okay? You look upset." "I want my quarterly statement. The real one, not whatever you've been promising to drop by." "Of course. I can print that right now." She'd turned to her computer, clicking around, but I'd noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Actually, you know what? The system's running slow. Why don't you come back tomorrow, and I'll have everything printed and bound for you." "I'll wait." We'd sat there in silence for 15 minutes while her computer supposedly loaded. Finally, Douglas Chen had appeared in the doorway, his face grave. "Mrs. Harper, could I speak with you in my office, please?" Melissa had stood up quickly. "Doug, this is really not necessary. Mrs. Harper is family. She's my mother-in-law. We're just having a misunderstanding about statement delivery timelines." "Sit down, Melissa," Douglas had said quietly. "Mrs. Harper, please come with me." In his office, with the door closed, Douglas had pulled up something on his computer and turned the monitor toward me. "I've been going through Melissa's accounts this morning. Mrs. Harper, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them very carefully. Did you authorize Melissa to invest your funds in real estate properties?" "No," she said. "Municipal bonds." "Did you authorize her to use your investment account as collateral for personal loans?" "What?" "No, of course not." Douglas had rubbed his face, suddenly looking much older. "Mrs. Harper, I'm going to be direct with you because you deserve the truth. The account Melissa set up in your name has been severely mismanaged. There are no municipal bonds. Your funds were used to purchase 3 rental properties in Florida, all of which are currently in foreclosure. Additionally, Melissa used your account to secure a $200,000 personal loan, which is now in default." The room had started spinning. "I don't understand. How is that legal? She's a financial advisor." "It's not legal. It's fraud. I've already contacted our legal team and the State Securities Board. Mrs. Harper, I'm so sorry, but I need to know how much did you initially invest with Melissa?" "Wusha Arwen Mei Yuan." He'd closed his eyes. "The current account balance is $47,000. I'd stopped hearing anything after that. $47,000 out of $520,000. Almost $500,000 gone. Tom's careful planning, his decades of work, the security he'd died believing he'd provided for me, all of it stolen by the woman who'd sat at my dinner table, who'd called me Mom at Thanksgiving, who'd promised to take care of me the way Tom would have wanted. I'd called James from Douglas's office. He hadn't believed me at first. "Mom, there has to be some kind of mistake. Melissa wouldn't, she's a professional. She's my wife." "James, I'm sitting here with her supervisor. The money is gone. Your wife stole from me." "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that. You're probably just confused about how investments work. This is exactly why Dad always handled the money. You get overwhelmed and panic." The words had cut deeper than the theft. My own son, suggesting I was too incompetent to understand I'd been robbed. "James, I need you to come down here. I need you to see this." "I can't. I'm at work." "Mom, I think you need to go home and calm down. We'll sort this out this weekend when everyone's thinking clearly." He'd hung up, and that's when I'd truly understood how alone I was. The next weeks were a blur of police reports, lawyers' offices, and meetings with financial crimes detectives. Melissa had been suspended from Henderson Wealth Management immediately, pending investigation. She'd lawyered up within 24 hours, some expensive attorney who kept using phrases like misunderstandings about investment strategies and sophisticated vehicles that mature investors sometimes struggle to comprehend. James had moved out of their house and back in with me, but not to support me. He'd sat at the kitchen table, shell-shocked, insisting there had to be an explanation. Maybe Melissa had made a mistake. Maybe she'd been trying to get higher returns and things had just gone bad. Maybe I'd misunderstood what I'd signed. "James, she stole $473,000 from me." "We don't know that yet. Not until the investigation is complete." But I knew. And some part of him knew too. I could see it in the way he couldn't meet my eyes. The detective assigned to my case, a woman named Sarah Martinez, had been patient but realistic. "Mrs. Harper, I want to be straight with you. Financial fraud cases like this are hard to prosecute. Melissa's arguing that these were legitimate investment decisions that didn't pan out, and that you knowingly signed documents giving her discretion. Without evidence that she intentionally deceived you, we're looking at civil court, not criminal." "But she lied to me. She said municipal bonds. She said safe investments." "I believe you. But proving what she said verbally, 4 months ago, in an office where you were alone? That's nearly impossible." I'd felt the hope draining out of me. At 64, with $47,000 to my name, I'd never be able to retire. I'd have to sell the house Tom and I had lived in for 32 years. I'd have to go back to nursing. If anyone would even hire a 64-year-old whose knees ached after standing for 2 hours. The worst part was my daughter, Grace, who lived in Seattle with her husband and my 2 grandkids. When I'd called to tell her what happened, there'd been a long silence. "Mom, I don't understand. Why did you give Melissa control of all your money?" "I didn't give her control. She was advising me on investments." "But you signed papers giving her power of attorney over the accounts," James told me. I didn't sign anything like that. I signed investment authorization forms." Another pause. "Mom, are you sure? Are you remembering this correctly?" And there it was. Even my daughter was questioning my mental competence. I'd started crying then, couldn't stop, and Grace had softened. "Okay, Mom. Okay. I'm sorry. I believe you. It's just, this is so much, and James is saying one thing, and you're saying another, and I don't know what to believe." "Believe me," I'd whispered. "Please, Grace, I'm your mother. Believe me." But I could hear the doubt in her voice when she promised to fly out in 2 weeks. That night, alone in the house, I'd sat in Tom's office, the place where he'd managed our lives with such care. His desk was exactly as he'd left it, pens in the holder he'd made in a woodworking class, the picture of us on our wedding day, a coffee mug that still had his last sip dried brown at the bottom. I'd never been able to bring myself to clean it. I'd opened his computer. I still remembered the password, our anniversary date, expecting nothing, just wanting to feel close to him, to pretend I could ask his advice one more time. And that's when I saw it. A folder on the desktop labeled, "For Linda, emergency only." My hands had been shaking so badly I could barely click on it. Inside were dozens of documents, scanned copies of every financial statement we'd ever received, going back 20 years, investment agreements, property deeds, insurance policies, and a document titled, "Read this first, Linda, Doc." I'd opened it, and Tom's voice had filled my head as clearly as if he'd been sitting beside me. "My dear Linda, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and something has gone very wrong with our finances. I pray you never need this folder, but I know you, sweetheart. You trust people. You see the good in them, even when you shouldn't. It's one of the things I love most about you, and it's also what keeps me up at night worrying. I've set up a system. Every financial account we have is being monitored by a service called Secure Watch. If there's ever unusual activity, large withdrawals, account changes, anything that doesn't match our normal patterns, it will trigger an alert. Those alerts come to an email address I created just for this purpose, tomsguardian2019@securemail.com. The password is your mother's maiden name plus the year we got married. If you're reading this, you should check that email right now. I've set it up so that any alerts also generate a paper trail, screenshots, transaction records, everything you'd need to prove what happened. I also want you to know that I've set aside money that no one knows about, not even you. And I'm sorry for that, but I needed to know you'd be protected even if someone convinced you to give away everything else. There's a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box #347. The key is in my workshop, inside the blue coffee can on the top shelf, the one you always told me to throw away. Inside the box, you'll find $75,000 in bonds and a detailed letter of instruction. Linda, I need you to hear this. You are not stupid. You are not senile. You are not confused. If someone has stolen from you, it is not your fault for trusting them. It is their fault for betraying that trust. Do not let anyone make you doubt yourself. You are the sharpest, strongest woman I've ever known. Fight for what's yours, sweetheart, and know that even though I'm not there, I'm still trying to take care of you. I always will be. All my love. Always and forever. Tom. I'd sobbed reading it, clutching the monitor like I could somehow hold on to him. Then I'd logged into the email account he'd set up. There were 47 alerts. The first one had been triggered the day Melissa moved my money out of the money market account. The subject line read, "Alert. Unusual account activity detected, $475,000 transfer initiated." Every alert came with attachments, screenshots of the transactions, copies of the authorization forms, showing where Melissa had forged my signature on documents I'd never seen. Bank statements showing money moving from my account into an LLC registered in Melissa's name. Property records for the Florida rentals, listing me as the purchaser but Melissa as the beneficiary. Tom had built me a case. A complete, documented, irrefutable case. I'd spent the rest of that night printing everything, organizing it into folders the way Tom would have. When Detective Martinez arrived the next morning, I'd called her at 6 a.m. She'd sat at my dining room table for 3 hours, going through every page. "Mrs. Harper," she'd finally said, "this changes everything. This isn't a he said, she said anymore. This is documentary evidence of systematic fraud. With this, we can bring criminal charges." James had come home to find police cars in the driveway. He'd stood in the doorway to the dining room, staring at the papers spread across the table, and I'd watched the denial finally crack. "Mom," he'd said. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know, honey. All those times I told you to calm down, that you were confused," his voice had broken. "I'm so sorry. I should have believed you." I'd gotten up and hugged him then. This man who was my little boy, no matter how tall he got, and we'd cried together while Detective Martinez tactfully looked at her phone. The trial took 8 months to prepare. Melissa's lawyer tried everything, claiming the documents were fabricated, that Tom's monitoring system was an invasion of privacy, that I had actually known about the real estate investments and was now suffering from selective memory loss due to grief. But Tom had been too thorough. The prosecution showed the jury the timeline. Alerts triggered within minutes of Melissa making transactions. Screenshots showing my account balance before and after each transfer. Most damning of all, video footage from Henderson Wealth Management's security cameras, showing Melissa going into the document storage room and emerging with papers that matched the forged signatures. The jury had deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, Melissa's face had been pale but composed, her lawyer whispering in her ear. The judge had read the verdict, guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse. At sentencing, I'd been allowed to give a victim impact statement. I'd stood at the podium, looking at this woman who'd called me mom, and I'd told the truth. "You didn't just steal money from me, Melissa. You stole my son's trust. You stole my confidence. You made me doubt my own mind. You took advantage of my grief and my loneliness, and you almost destroyed me. The only reason I'm standing here today is because my husband loved me enough to protect me even after he died. I hope you think about that every day of your sentence. I hope you think about how real love actually looks." The judge had sentenced her to 7 years, with restitution. I'd never see all the money back. The Florida properties were worthless. The loan was unrecoverable, but between the remaining $47,000, the restitution payments, and Tom's hidden bonds, I'd have about $280,000. Not the $500,000 I'd started with, but enough. Enough to keep the house, to retire with dignity, to take Grace's kids to Disney World like I'd promised. James and Melissa divorced within weeks of the sentencing. He'd moved back in with me temporarily, helping me sort through the financial wreckage, both of us trying to figure out how to be a family again. Grace had flown out for the trial, and afterward, she'd sat with me in Tom's office. "Mom, I'm so sorry I doubted you. I should have known. You were trying to be fair, honey. To see both sides. That's not a bad quality. But you're my mother. I should have just believed you." I'd pulled her close. "You believe me now. That's what matters." Later that night, after Grace had gone to bed and James had retreated to his old bedroom, I'd sat alone in Tom's office again. I'd opened his laptop, read his letter one more time, and then I'd written him back, even though I knew he'd never read it. "My dear Tom, you saved me. Even after death, even from wherever you are now, you reached back and saved me. I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline I didn't even know existed. I understand now why you set all this up, why you kept that money hidden, why you monitored everything so carefully. You knew that something like this could happen. You knew I'd need protection, and you loved me enough to provide it. I'm okay. We're going to be okay. The house is safe. James is healing. Grace flew out, and she believes me, and she's sorry. Everything you worried about, everything you planned for, it worked. I miss you so much it still takes my breath away sometimes. But I feel you in everything, in the careful way you organize these files, in the monitoring system you set up, in that hidden key you left for me to find. You're still taking care of me, sweetheart. You always will be. I promise I'll be more careful now. I'll ask more questions. I'll read the fine print. I'll never again let someone make me doubt what I know to be true. I'm going to finish this the way you taught me, strong, sharp, and fighting for what's right. Thank you for loving me the way you did. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for believing I'd be strong enough to fight when the time came. All my love. Always and forever, Linda. I'd saved the letter in Tom's folder, right next to his instructions. Then I'd closed the laptop, turned off the light, and gone to bed in the house we'd built together, the house that was still mine, still safe, because my husband had loved me enough to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. At 64, I'd learned the hardest lesson of my life. Trust is a gift, but protection is an act of love. And sometimes, the people who truly love us are the ones who plan for the possibility that we might need saving. Tom had saved me. And now, with the evidence he'd left behind, the security he'd provided, and the strength he'd always believed I had, I was going to save myself too.